To go. I want to thank everyone for joining us for our fourth talk today in our post-approval and generic session. Today we'll be talking with Gustavo Mendes, who's joining us from Anvisa in Brazil. With that, you can go ahead and share your slides.
So my topic will be pharmacometrics and regulation. And first, I'll have to be very clear about how things work here in Brazil, because what happens that Brazil has a regulatory structure that it has to be considered in order to think how new approaches and how things are going to be proposed to Anvisa's perspective. So one of the first things is that the concept of a positive law. So different of other agencies in Brazil, what happens is that the law system we have in Brazil is that we have to say specifically what is expected from the government or from the agency in order to companies to submit. So that's a different that's a little bit different of what happens in regulatory agencies like in US or EMA, where you can have a guideline which is very flexible and new proposals may come all the time. So that's why we are moving the regulatory structure in Brazil in order to be more open. So the guidances we have and the normatives we have, like resolutions, normative instructions, and guides, tend to be more open in order to accept the changes in the science, specifically when we talk about pharmacometrics, because we know that this is a going on topic, an ongoing discussion. So that's why we have to be more open, to have more generality versus detailing, to not go specifically that much in detail. That's why for pharmacometrics, that's not the only reason, but that's one reason we don't have a specific requirements for pharmacometrics. But the first message I want to share with you is that we are very open for this kind of approaches here in Brazil. So we have issued a guideline in 2019, a guideline that was the result of good discussions among the experts in drug registration department here in Anvisa, in order to give transparency of the work on how we do the assessment of new drug products and also the generic products in Brazil. The idea is to be very clear on the expectations we have as regulatory agencies and the references that we use because of this movement we have done since some years ago of regulatory convergence. The idea is to be more aligned with the best regulatory practices, and that's why we have this movement in order to be aligned with the international regulatory agencies. Specifically, when we talk about pharmacometrics and how these approaches are treated by us right now, we have, on this guideline I have mentioned, we have raised some questions. So whenever a dossier comes to us that that present us some modeling or simulation strategy to answer specific questions, we have some questions raised by the experts in order to identify those studies. So one example is that do the pharmacokinetic data allow characterizing the absorption profile, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of the drug? And whenever there is this modeling and simulation used, or whether the data were obtained from specific studies or from modeling simulation, population pharmacokinetics, or clinical pharmacology studies, we have to identify those, and we have to understand why this approach is done, and what is the reason, and what is the conclusions we may have from this submission. Another question we have in our guideline is regarding the intrinsic factors on the pharmacokinetics. So if modeling and simulation is part of this identification of intrinsic factor influence on pharmacokinetics is also one of the questions we have. And also extrinsic factors. We have to identify as experts in the agency whether the data were obtained from the study, subgroup analysis data, or data obtained from modeling simulation or population pharmacokinetics. And whenever it happens, companies expected to present data from clinical relevant pharmacokinetic interactions with other medicine and substances, and with those, if there is modeling or simulation or any approach on the pharmacometrics field, it has to be very clear for us. We also want to know if there is any data from population pharmacokinetic studies, and in this case, we expect data to be presented related to inter and intra-individual variability that may be due to the intrinsic or extrinsic factor obtained through population pharmacokinetic studies. So in our submissions we have revising, we have seen a growing number of this kind of approach in Brazil. And beyond the identification of the study and explaining to us the rationale why it is using, and also the validity of the model proposed for us in order to present data for variability or the intrinsic or extrinsic factors, we have to be very confident as regulators that this data is really supporting the claim that it's going to be proposed both for waiving of studies or for mentioning in the label of the product. So that's why we have to be very we are open on receiving this information, but also it has to come for us well explained in order for us to understand the rationale, understand the models we use it. Population pharmacokinetics, the study of the source of variability of drug concentrations in the target population that received clinical relevant doses of the drug under their study. And the idea is to identify the pathophysiological factors that alter dose response ratio and the extent of these changes so that the dose of the drug can be changed appropriately if such changes are associated with clinical significant changes in the therapeutic index. So that's the definition we have included in our guidance. And we understand that whenever we have this kind of approach or this kind of study presented, we have to see and to see very, very clearly the factors and also how this will affect the endpoints or the clinical significant changes in order for us to be confident that this may be the right approach for us to get the answers we need. We also, when we are revising the label of a product, we always expect that the pharmacological characteristics of the drug, PK and PD, is well described, both for the prescriptors and the population or the patients that's going to use the product. And if there is any data that is obtained from modeling and simulation or population pharmacokinetics, the label and the package of the product that describe the way it's going to be used, it has to mention it. And that's why we have to verify and be very confident on the model used in order to include this on the label. Well, as I mentioned, the Anvisa was in 2019 Anvisa was accepted as part of ICA Management Committee. And with that, a lot of commitments were done by the agency in order to apply, in order to implement guidelines in Brazil that are already harmonized internationally. So that's why I listed here some of the guidelines that we are contributing with experts from the Anvisa in order to help for the harmonization, and also that may have interface with pharmacometrics. So one is the E11A, which is the pediatric extrapolation, and this is one of the guides that we understand that may improve the expectation and the regulation of the pharmacometrics approaches in Brazil, and also M12, which is the drug interaction study. We have proposed and we have supported the idea that a new topic should be raised soon on ICH level, as the management committee part of this on ICH. We have supported this model-informed drug product development because we understand that different guidances has raised this possibility, but we don't have a specific guidance saying the regulatory expectations on this kind of model and this kind of approaches regarding validation, regarding minimum data to be reported, minimum data to be submitted, how we're gonna reassess if needed. So that's why we claim the idea that this topic on ICH will be very helpful. We had a seminar on Visa plus 10, which is the expectation of the agency for the next 10 years. And what we have seen is that one of the topics that was raised was the development and the stimulation of use of data modeling, simulation, extrapolation techniques. So we have decided as agency to stimulate and to develop this knowledge here, because we understand these techniques can support efficiency of new drug products development, and can reduce the need or optimize the design of clinical studies. So that's why it's a very important topic for us. Anvisa experience on PBPK and PBBM is very limited because the discussions here in Brazil were raised quite recently, but we have seen some potentialities, and we are open for discussions and proposals from company to bring us and to convince us, explaining the rationale. And I have highlighted some possibilities here. So one is to define clinical relevant drug products specifications. We understand this is a topic that is growing here in Brazil, because we as regulators, we want to look forward this kind of approach in order to establish specification of drug products here in Brazil, other than just specifications that there are no relation with any performance of the drug. So the solution specification and bridging between biorelevant and quality control dissolution methods. So this is one of the ideas we have seen that are really important for us. Also, regarding bioequivalence and PK comparability, we have food effect and biowaiver. We see a lot of opportunities here, specifically when we talk about generics, which the Brazilian company we have stimulated the Brazilian generic companies and also all international generic companies, but specifically Brazilian generic companies, to bring more this kind of approach in order for us to understand and evolve on these topics. And one big thing here, a hot topic here, is post-approval changes. We see a lot of potential on this kind of approaches, PBPK and PBBM, in the use of post-approval CMC or manufacturing site transfer, because we have a lot of situations that may be a lot of studies that may be waived, and optimization of a lot of effort from company and also from us if we use this kind of tools in our submission. So that's why, and with the pandemic situation, we received a lot of claims for a lot of applications for post-approval changes, and we see a lot of potential on this because lockdown situations and changes needed in order to maintain the product on the market, it seems a good opportunity. So the challenges we have here in Brazil is the training. We are put a lot of investments on this in time, in effort to train the experts here in Brazil. We know that this is a topic that needs constant training, and that's why we understand it's important to have our experts in touch with what is happening in the international discussions on these topics. We see it also, the harmonization of terms, protocol, and reports as a challenge, because in some cases we don't have in Portuguese terms here, which is a challenge for our local industry. Also, how to establish a protocol and how to report to us, but we are working on this. And I think that what is common to other agencies, I've seen the FDA presentation before mine, and I have seen that disengagement on visa, university, and industry, it is the main topic because it is important. We have to integrate these stakeholders in order to go forward on this. So with that, I finish my presentation. Obrigado. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any question we may have.
Thank you, Gustavo Mendez. It was a very nice summary and presentation on Anvisa and the efforts you guys are making for the modeling and simulation. We have a question in the chat, which is how Anvisa currently accepts or sees pharmacometric studies for dose adjustments. An example is adult versus children or elderly.
Well, as I mentioned, we are very open. We see that it's a good opportunity also seeing optimization of dosages and this kind of changes in therapeutics based in pharmacometrics. It is a really good opportunity. We don't have a guideline saying how to report this, but I think the main lesson is we have to understand why and what is the rationale of the model and how it's gonna give us the answers regarding the adjustments or any claim the company have in order for us to accept.
Okay. And then a question is, historically, a lot of the guidances for Anvisa talk about target populations. And I think people have interpreted that to say that, your clinical evidence needs to be conducted in Brazilian citizens. Is that still hold true in this? And especially in terms of modeling and simulation, if they had models built with a large, diverse population, would that be acceptable to apply to a Brazilian situation, the target population there?
Well, we don't have a restriction to studies that were not done in Brazilian population. And because historically, we have some cases regarding bioequivalence that we have the need that the reference product is the reference product that is marketed here in our country. And we know that in some cases, the product that is outside is not the same product that is here in Brazil. So that's why we have this requirement. But even though we don't we don't establish that the product is that the study is to be conducted in Brazilian population, we are very open for this. And this includes also modeling and simulation, of course. So that's why we are very open to understand the rationale. Of course, if the study is not done here, we have questions about how we can extrapolate the information generated to Brazil, if there is any concern on this, but we are open for this.
Excellent, good to hear. I think we're actually close enough to the end. Unless there's any last questions, we can leave a little early, give people some timing there. Thank you again for joining us, Gustavo Mendez.